Well, my name is Gabriel Gasque. I am head of outreach at protocols.io. And today we will be discussing with Dr. Hui-Ting Shih uh, her PLOS ONE Lab Protocol article entitled Description, Reliability, and Utility of a Ground Reaction Force Triggered Protocol for precise delivery of unilateral trip-like perturbations during gait, and the associated protocol in protocols.io. Dr. Xu received her undergraduate and master's training at the National Taiwan University and earned a PhD degree in interdisciplinary health sciences from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, USA. In addition to being a researcher, she has also worked as a clinical physical therapist and instructor in clinical and educational institutions. Her research interest is motor skill learning in people with neurological diseases and lower limb amputation. Over 10 years, she has dedicated herself to using a variety of approaches, including performance-based, biomechanical, and neurophysiological outcomes to investigate the learning effects and mechanism. Hui-Ting, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for the instruction, Dr. Gasque.
So, could to begin to kick off, could you please briefly describe what this protocol is about, how to use it, and why it is relevant?
So to start from the original thought and purpose of developing this protocol is about the movement that we want to analyze, which is tripping or stumble, if we can say it. Because in our lab, we work with mostly people with lower limb amputation and also people with older adults. So from our conversation and interaction with them, tripping or stumble has been a challenging task for them. And that's always a common cause of falls for mainly these two populations. So in order to study how they respond to a tripping perturbation or a stumble perturbation, the first thing that we want to do is how do we simulate a tripping perturbation in a safe environment. So we can observe their response, we can try to do some intervention to change that, but also making sure that they are safe. So mainly two purposes we want to achieve. One is we want to simulate a realistic enough tripping stimulation. And then the other thing is it has to be in the lab and it has to be in a safe surroundings. So that's the reason that we develop it. And for sure, right now, how we use it is we use it to deliver to the populations that we're interested in, that we work with, and to observe how they respond to these tripping perturbations.
And to understand the significance of the protocol, can you explain what was the state of the art at the moment? Why was there anything similar published before? Were there protocols to address the same question? And if so, why these previous protocols didn't work for you and you had to create or optimize your own?
I see. So now to our knowledge, there are three main different ways that people use to simulate tripping. The first one is obstacle pace. They will use a concealed obstacle like a block and drop it to the treadmill. So when people walk on the treadmill, they would unexpectedly having a block coming to them and that would trip them. So that's one very common way of doing it. The reason that we chose not to use it for one reason is because of in order to not let the participants seeing or hearing the obstacle is coming, a lot of times people have to wear goggle, wear headphones. However, that definitely influence the normal visual flow and hearing input. So there's one thing that we think that information, that sensory information might be critical for their response as well. And we don't want to block them. That's one reason. The other reason is using the obstacle. Usually it's a bit hard to control when the perturbation is coming. because for tripping response, when the person encounters that tripping perturbation is very critical. So if the response happening in the early phase of the gait or a late phase of the gait, the response is very different. So in order to make sure the response is uncomparable, we don't want to waste too much time tripping our patient for many, many times and just pick up those comparable responses. We don't want to do that. We want to do it very efficiently and precisely. That's why we didn't choose the obstacle-based one. Another very common approach is a tether-based. So people will use a wire and attach it to a person's foot. So when people walk on the treadmill in a very specific window during the gait, people will tighten the wire to trip the person. And the reason that we didn't use it is there's always a big concern about, first thing, how tight the wire should be. So that's enough tripping perturbation. And the other one is how long the duration that we need to trip the person. So it's enough tripping, but it's not interrupting their response. There's usually a gray area, and we want to stay away from that. So that we use in our protocol, we use a treadmill, which is a 2-belt side-by-side treadmill, and it's instrumented. So it's force plate underneath each belt. In other words, that means we can program the treadmill. So at one time, there's only one belt changing its velocity. So first thing, that perturbation is unilateral, which is very realistic, because usually when we kick on something, it's unilateral, but not bilateral. And then we can pick up the timing based on their ground reaction force when they walk on it. So that delivery timing is very, very precise. So that's the reason that we use our protocol, and we chose to update those previous protocols.
And you went to all this work to develop a protocol that could be manipulated so precisely for your research purposes. What was the motivation first to create the protocol in protocols.io and share it with the community? And second, to have it peer reviewed as a standalone methodological paper?
I see. So after we developing that protocol, we receive a lot of different feedbacks. As people, when we go out for conferences, when we talk to our researcher friends, we notice there's always a need. And then there are always some interest out there to study tripping perturbation, stumbling perturbation. And we're thinking that then we spent time, we spent resources developing this protocol, and why not just share that with our research or even the broader world? So when people need it, when people find it useful for them as well, they can just take it, and we can overall reduce the cost of every single lab just developing their own, and there's always subtle differences in there. So maybe the results from different labs cannot compare with each other. And definitely we want to reduce that that concerns in the research world as well. And then we noticed that protocol.io work with PLOS ONE as well to publish protocols. So we're like, that's a perfect match, and that's exactly what we want to do. So that's the first intention about we want to publish it. Going to the peer review process, that's definitely a very, very, I would say right now, very, very good decision that we decided to do. Because after we submit our protocol, we receive very good feedback from the reviewers to mainly talk about the results that we found from healthy participants, from healthy young adults, from healthy older adults. So we can dig into the protocol more and think about it more and provide more relevant information for the future readers. So yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity.
And what was the motivation of you and your colleagues to make the peer review history available in the paper?
I see. We feel like the history is kind of the trace that we walk from our initial thoughts, the motivation that we talk about, to the final product that people can see right now. So we feel that perhaps, let's say, interaction from authors and readers, we consider it that way. So if people want to learn something throughout the process, we're more than happy to share that. And also, I think that provides additional information for the readers that what are some thoughts that we initially have and what are some things that we added after the reviewers' comments. So we feel like this is very important process for the readers to know as well.
And now we have discussed peer review and how it shaped the protocol and your motivation to share that shaping, that process with the readers. But I would like us now to change gears a little bit and focus on the protocol itself a little bit more. And for those potential users, is there anything that while developing the protocol you tried and didn't work and didn't make it to the final version of the protocol?
I see. Yes, that's very, very good question. Initially, we talk about the timing of the perturbation, which is very critical in our protocol. Initially, we've tried different time windows for us to deliver perturbation. Would it be in the early gait cycle? Would it be in the middle gait cycle? What would be the best time window for us to do it? And then in our protocol, we decided to deliver the perturbation in the early stance phase. But actually, we've tried it in the late stance phase. However, it didn't work out very well because when we deliver the perturbation quickly, the person is entering their swing phase. So if the person walks too fast, they might just skip the perturbation and not being tripped successfully as what we wanted. So that's the reason that we develop our protocol, deliver the perturbation in a specific time window. So I would say if people would like to modify the protocol, we provide the MATLAB codes in protocol IOs as well. If people want to modify that, I would perhaps suggest them not to do it in the late stance phase because we've tried it, it didn't work out too well, and it probably wouldn't evoke a good enough trip recovery responses for the persons walking on the treadmill.
And in addition to this timing of the perturbation in relationship with the gait, if I get it correctly, what are there other critical steps in the protocol to make it a successful one?
For their walking, first thing we would like to make sure that because we use a split side by side dual belt treadmill. So first thing we want to make sure that the person don't cross over the midline because our triggering criteria is based on their ground reaction force. So if they cross over, that means the ground reaction force must be messed up. There'll be force from both sides, or there might be no force for this specific step on one single belt. So there's one thing for the step that we want to make sure. For the other thing, going back to that time window during gait, we talk about the trip recovery timing of it. If the perturbation happens in the early phase, it would elicit one specific type of response. If it happens in the late phase, it would elicit another type of response. So that means that's also a limitation of our protocol because we deliver the timing only in the early stance phase. So we will only elicit one type of response, but not the other.
And I mean, I noticed that you published the protocol about a year ago, in October in 2022, and the paper was accepted about 6 months ago. Since the time of publication, was there any necessity to troubleshoot the protocol, or have you tried to optimize it any further?
Yes, we modified it a little bit because in the published version of it, we have two different accelerations and we call it different, we can call it task difficulty. So if the acceleration is higher, that means that perturbation or the tripping is more brutal than a smaller or a lower acceleration. And we fixed that into 6 and 12. That's just some initial thoughts that we have based on previous literature, that the acceleration of 6 and 12 are common and that might be applicable for most of the people. However, after we tried and used the protocols across different populations, different participants, we noticed perhaps that number shouldn't be fixed to 6 and 12. We should allow it some room for it so we can have a spectrum of different perturbation severity, from very gentle one to very severe, very brutal one. So that's one thing that we modify and we change. So now the perturbation is not only small and large, not just 6 and 12 anymore. We can just input the number to decide the acceleration. So the severity, magnitude of the perturbation now can be a linear variables that people can change.
I think that, what we have discussed in relationship to both the peer review and the protocol itself has been very informative. And I'm sure that the tips that you have provided are going to help the users of the protocol, both regarding the timing of the perturbation and the acceleration and the flexibility that people should consider in the acceleration of the treadmills.
Right.
I would like now to change gears again. And I don't know if you can share with us, being a early career scientist, what has been the impact of getting this peer-reviewed paper published?
To me, I think that's very good information for the research friends out there, that, hey, we've done this and this is what we've tried. And I feel like this is first thing, it's very good experience for me, because when we developed this protocol, we definitely work with engineers with different disciplines to work on that. So I think that also demonstrates the ability of my lab, my colleague, and myself of doing this. And also, as I mentioned earlier, tripping and stumbling is always a very popular topic, and it's always a concern for a lot of different populations. So I feel like this is a good information sending out to the world that, hey, we're doing this as well. And also we have the ability to do this as well. So if people are interested in doing this type of research together, I think this is also a very good window that we open to the world, that showing that, hey, we can do this together.
And so before we finish the conversation, is there anything that you would like to share, mention, that we haven't touched so far?
I see. I feel like when we developed it, there's one thing that I would like to specifically mention, and also maybe a note for the future users, is about the person's safety. I feel like, yes, we always want to develop something that's useful, that simulates the conditions that we want to observe, but also the safety, I think, is always a super important thing that we want to make sure in the first place. And for this specific protocol, because the perturbation won't be triggered if there's nobody walking on it. That means if people want to modify the protocol, they want to change something and they want to test it, they must have a person walking on the treadmill so that they can see how their modification, how the perturbation works on the person. And this step is very important, because even ourselves, when we develop that, we consider ourselves as healthy, active individuals, so that we're like, okay, maybe we don't have to wear the harness to protect ourselves. We can just try our protocol ourselves without the safety harness. However, ended up we have a couple persons fell on the treadmill. Even we're healthy, even we're just testing our protocol 101, we fell as well. So if the researcher friends out there would like to try it, would like to modify the protocol, please make sure they protect themselves as well.
And I see that the use of the harness is very clearly depicted in the paper.
Yes, right? Exactly. So yes, please wear it. Even though you're healthy, even though you're active, please wear it.
Well, Hui-Ting, thank you so much. I think, again, it has been very insightful from the point of view of putting together the protocol and also about the details of the protocol itself. With that, I would like to thank you for your time and your willingness to share your method development with the community.
The appreciation is mine. Thank you for the opportunity for let me publishing, having the peer review, and now even that interview to share that. So appreciate it a lot.